welcome everybody and yeah.
Firstly, by welcoming His Worship, the Mayor of San Fernando, Honorable Kazim Hussain, the political leader of the People's National Movement, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, we have with him, sitting to his right, the candidate for Lebre, Ms. Nicole Olivere. To the left, we have look at that, and he's waiting for me. Mr. Faris Al-Rawi, and our candidate for San Fernando West. And next to him, we have sitting the candidate for Mearu, none other than Mr. Rambarat. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure tonight to start this conversation. As you all know, this is streaming live, and therefore it's going to have a short session which each member of the head table here, speaking for a few minutes, we would also entertain questions. This is all about us talking to each other, having a conversation. But before getting involved, I'd just like to spend a few minutes chatting with you. As we all know, we have waited long for this general election 2015. And the question is really, what really we are here to talk about. As we all know, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of noise in the system. And this conversation is about how we can bring to you the information that we all must share so that when September the 7th comes, we know exactly how we should vote. We should vote for the People's National Movement. Ladies and gentlemen, the last 5 years, let me ask you, what has been happening in this country, or what has not been happening in this country? You know, we are asking you, ladies and gentlemen, that we want you to consider all the facts. And tonight, in this conversation, I am sure all our speakers will bring a lot of clarity in terms of our commitment in moving forward. We are not just asking you to vote tonight for the People's National Movement. We are here to give you the facts and articulate to you in terms of what the People's National Movement is all about, and the astute leadership of our political leader, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. What have been some of the very recent issues? Ladies and gentlemen, many of us would have heard or read in the newspaper the downgrade by Moody. This is an international rating agency, and what did they tell us? They told us, in fact, some of the problems. There have been lack of governance. I think we know all about that. They talk about the lack of macroeconomic policy. We talk about deficit budgets, fiscal deficits for the last 5 years, and so much more. Ladies and gentlemen, if we continue along this road, if we continue along this path, Trinidad and Tobago is not going to be the nice place that we all grew up in and want it to be. So what exactly have been some of the issues? When I just indicated to you, we see deficit budgets. You know, I always tell my students, you know, from a young child I was told, if you spend more than you earn, you go bankrupt. Isn't that correct? We all know that. Yet, we understand when we had the financial crisis, we would have had a year or two of this problem. But as you could appreciate, this has persisted. And what has happened to Trinidad and Tobago? We have seen debt escalating. Since 2006 to now, we have seen debt has doubled. And let me tell you a little secret. What you're seeing is over $91 billion may not, and I do not think from being there before, it includes any contingent liability or off-balance sheet debt. So in other words, we have a lot of work to do in this country. We just cannot continue spending and not being accountable. Let us talk a little bit, as I said, Moody's talked about weak macroeconomic policy, as a matter of fact, not having adequate policy, and we know all about that. In the last 5 years, we have not seen really any consistent policy. Further to that, ladies and gentlemen, we talk about lack of governance. We all know about that, yes? Lack of governance. We have seen state boards, chairmen and boards being changed every Monday morning. Is that correct? What does that mean? Over almost 12 months, they said they were going to take to select chairmen and directors. And what do we see? A total lack of governance. Is this what we want for our country? You know, I always told my people, whenever I speak, I talk about really the state enterprise sector. We are the shareholders in the state enterprise sector. Isn't that correct? Who are the shareholders? All of us. And what is happening recently, we just heard, they're going to have an initial public offering of Phoenix gas processors. I don't have time to talk about it, but let us just discuss. Really, is this the right time? Is it at the right price? So, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you so much more, which you already know. We have seen 24 ministers being fired. We have talked so much about this. And we must not forget what, in fact, this government has done and what they have not done regarding performance. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are very fortunate to have with us the esteemed panel led by the political leader, Dr. Christopher Rowley. Let us talk a little bit in terms of the achievements of the People's National Movement, particularly under the stewardship of Dr. Rowley. He was a cabinet minister in the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Planning, Minister of Housing, and so much more. But they will tell their own story. So now let me introduce to you all the first speaker. The first speaker, as already mentioned, the candidate for Lebré. And we have with us today Nicole Oliveri. Nicole Oliveri has a BSc in chemistry and computer science. She also has a master's in chemistry. She has been born and bred in this constituency, and she reminded me she also has 2 children here. So let us now invite Oliveri to make her presentation.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, everyone. Mayor of San Fernando, Alderman Kazim Hussein, political leader of the People's National Movement, Dr. Christopher Rowley, fellow panelists, candidates, good evening, everyone. I consider it a privilege to be part of this conversation tonight with Dr. Rowley. I am an energy professional, and I volunteered to be the candidate for Lebré constituency because the patrimony of this nation is being frittered away by this disaster of a government. After completing my secondary education, I chose to study locally because I have faith in the national education system. So as the moderator just said, I did a BSc and a Master of Philosophy in Chemistry, both at the University of the West Indies. Upon completion of my studies, I joined the energy sector. This was at the time during the Atlantic LNG Train 4 expansion project. You will recall that it was the PNM government that decided to introduce LNG into the national energy mix. It was Prime Minister Patrick Manning who was very much instrumental in bringing the LNG project into Trinidad. And he insisted that as a nation we take an equity investment in the project. And this was done via state enterprise. When the Trains 2 and 3 expansion project was done, the PNM was not in government, and the UNC government opted not to take an equity interest in those investments. Instead, they chose to simply receive the royalties from the project without any value added to the nation. Luckily, by the time the Train 4 expansion was being contemplated, luckily by the time
yeah, that's it. There you go. You can just take it off the air.
They can take it off.
What a gentleman.
As I was saying, by the time the Train 4 expansion was being contemplated, luckily the PNM were back in power. And this time they insisted that, again, the nation take an equity investment. And what this did was this created new jobs within the state enterprise. And that's how I became employed in the energy sector. So you see a clear example of a PNM policy decision leading to the creation of real sustainable jobs in the nation. And what we found is that the new skill sets were needed to be learned by members of the state enterprise. Now, and this shows you the PNM's policy for ensuring new investments by taking an equity stake and partnering with the investors to ensure that projects can come on stream. Another example of PNM policy really working for the nation in the energy sector was the last PNM administration's thrust into seeking international energy investments. Back in 2010, at the time we went out of office, the state enterprises were already presented with lucrative energy projects, both in East and West Africa. Because of the relationship that the PNM government had maintained with the African countries, and because of our international relations policies, we already had a foot in the door. Everyone in the energy sector knows that the new frontier for hydrocarbon exploration is on the African continent. And we were already well underway with 2 lucrative projects. But when this new government came into power in 2010, they showed absolutely no interest in pursuing these investments. And as a nation, we lost that opportunity. Now, we need to recognize that given our limited gas reserves, any future sustainability of our downstream sector may very well require imported feedstock. And this is why the PNM government policy at the time would have been to seek international partnerships where national state enterprises would become international players, therefore securing cooperation in the future. But this government has shown that they really do not have the necessary interests of the nation at heart when it comes to making energy investments in the future. So the position I was in at the state enterprise, I mean, seeing these bad policy decisions, seeing examples of unsuitable persons being put in charge of major institutions, critical state enterprises and critical institutions in the nation, this led me as a national and a patriot to really question if this government had the best interests of Trinidad at heart. My colleagues and I would get together every day and we would talk about the latest mistake and missteps, and we would lament all the poor decisions that were being made by the government. And we'd be questioning ourselves, what can we do to help? It's difficult as professionals to sit down and watch your country's patrimony being wasted, watch taxpayers' dollars being thrown away, and not decide that you want to do something, you want to help. And we would have discussions and we'd wonder what possible ways we can help. And then I said to them, I said, you know, the best way to help would be to be part of the team that would be taking over. Because there are times for people to sit at the back, but sometimes you need people to step forward. And instead of sitting down and saying, well, why doesn't this person do this and why doesn't someone else do that? Ask yourself, well, why not me? So one day I decided, look, I want to be part of the solution. And that's when I decided the best way to be part of the solution would be to offer myself a candidacy. Now, the road to becoming a candidate was not an easy one. It certainly entailed a lot of sacrifice on my part. Once my intention became known, I suffered a fair amount of victimization on the job. But I was determined because our very future is at stake. The future sustainability of the nation is in jeopardy. And you all know that. I mean, a number of people who were never politically active before are becoming politically active now because we recognize how critically important it is. Prior to 2010, I had absolutely no interest in politics. Yes, I voted in every election, but I was never politically active. I had no interest in politicians. But over these 5 years, there was no way I could continue to remain a bystander, just watching our nation being led down a path that can only lead to failed nation status. So tonight, I'm just pleased to share that story with you, because I know there are many of you out there. There may be some of you out there who may still be uncertain, still sitting on the fence and wondering, do we get involved? Do we vote? I mean, when I'm walking around, I meet lots of people, particularly youths though, who say they don't get involved in politics. But politics affects your life. Political decisions affect your very lives. You cannot continue to live in Trinidad and be shielded by the impact of political decisions. So you need to think about your future and think about, is it acceptable for me to continue to sit on the fence and leave that responsibility up to everyone else? I'm sure that if you think about it, you will recognize that the time has come for you to get up and act. Come out and vote. Thank you.
Our hands together for the solution for Lebre, Miss Nicole Oliver. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our next presenter is Mr. Clarence Rambarat. He is the candidate for Mayaro. As we all know, Mr. Rambarat is an attorney at law, a columnist, and so much more. But he says, Christine, keep it short and sweet because I have a lot to say. So could we put our hands together?
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is a fascinating audience. Every creed and race has found an equal place. And you are here because you love this country. You took the time, you took the effort, and you walked, you drove, and you came here, not in support of the PNM, but in support of red, white, and black. And that is why I am here. That is why my wife Camille is here with me. And that is why we have taken this country on this journey, led by Dr. Rowley, to present a slate of candidates that will defy every criticism. None of us will stand on a street corner like a circus clown, waving a windmill, proclaiming no Rowley. All of us will stand and walk mile after mile in this country, proclaiming Trinidad and Tobago first. Yesterday I met some young people, Dana, Dwayne, and Antonio. I meet young people all the time, like Faris and Stuart and all the others. We have magnets for young people because we have not done a very good job with our young people. Dana, Dwayne, Antonio feel they have been left on the fringes, that this country has moved on without them. They don't see a way ahead. They don't see a magic wand, and they don't see a golden spoon. And what the young people and the older people like me amongst the 41 candidates present is an opportunity for young people. This is our last opportunity to demonstrate that we could be trusted as adults. This is our last hope. The new voters are saying to all of us, we will support you. I have no doubt that the young people in my constituency and the young people in every constituency will support this slate But this is the last opportunity because we are given, because we are running solely on trust and credibility. And if we let them down, there is no other hope for this country. So this is an important task, a very important task. This is more than roads and drains and bridges and coastal erosion and recreation grounds. You know what? I tell people I'm very concerned about that. I have given, for love of country, the last year figuring out every nook and cranny in Mayaro and coming up with some plan with my political leader and with the party to fix it. But above all the things I've seen in Trinidad and Tobago, nothing ranks higher than the needs of the people. And what people want, they want to be heard, they want to be represented. They want, when a politician stands in Parliament, that politician says, Mr. Speaker, I speak on behalf of the people of San Fernando West. And this is what they've said to me. Nobody wants to hear, I have the best looking Prime Minister, the tallest Prime Minister, great as the Prime Minister. Everybody wants to hear, when you're elected, that you go into Parliament and you speak for your constituents. And that is what people are saying to us. And representation has become the most powerful word in this campaign. And Dr. Rowley a few months ago made the point. We are elected on a piece of legislation called the Representation of People's Act. And that is not by accident. We are not put there to become superstars or anything. We are put there to serve. And every citizen of this country is expecting that from September 8th, it will not be business as usual. That what we take into Parliament is a commitment to serve this country and make it what it could be. Most of you have a connection with Mayaro. I see the cars from San Fernando coming in my constituency every weekend. You know the struggles. Coastal erosion. You know the struggles. Drainage. You know the struggles. Infrastructure. The road, I spoke about the road recently. Well, I've just gone through a major piece of massage. Coming down the road, 2 hours of massaging. So you understand the relationship between Faris's constituency and my constituency. A highway will not fall from the sky. But what we must do is we must commit tonight and on September 7 to do the right thing for this country. And I think you know what you should do. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rambarat, and you heard he said, my constituency of Mayaro. So we know we have to go out there and certainly vote him in. Clarence, that was really a nice dissertation there. Our next speaker is none other than Faris Al-Rawi. He's a third... Faris, they don't want me to introduce you, they know you already. He's a third-generation politician. As we all know, his mother, Diane Sukaran, is here. His cousins are here. And as you know, as a matter of fact, Faris graduated from University of the West Indies with honors. He was top of the class at in the University Hewarding Law School. He has done a master's in several things. And the night is short. And again, like the last speaker, Faris has so much to tell you. So rather than take his time, let us put our hands together to welcome Faris Al-Rawi.
Thank you very much, Christine Sahadew. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to San Fernando West, those of you on the World Wide Web. Streaming live. I could have said that I concur with everything Clarence said and say no more. After all, I've walked Gulfview 4 times now. This constituency is well known to me. Trinidad and Tobago is well known to me. But I just want to point out for us all here tonight, first of all, not only is this crowd extremely diverse, but in this audience I see sitting people who, on the last election, weren't inclined necessarily to supporting the PNM. I see in this crowd leaders of society. I see servants in society. I see San Fernandians. 99% of us here are San Fernandians and from San Fernando West and from this constituency. But what I want to point out to the World Wide Web is that this is a conversation, and we have open microphones at the back. And we are not cloistered and unafraid to interact with the people whom we wish to represent. Far be that from the truth. Our political leader moves all around Trinidad and Tobago and invites members of the public to step forward and challenge us. So tonight's format is simple. A few minutes of introductory remarks, and more so the conversation coming from the other side of the floor. We are not afraid to be inspected and to stand up for what we think or what we purport to be a solution for Trinidad and Tobago. Clarence touched on coastal erosion, drainage, infrastructure. That is a very real problem for this particular community. Those of us who saw the mud silts piled high at the back of our homes not far from here, those of us who witnessed uncut lots, those of us who see a complete failure of services, be it in crime and security, be it in representation in terms of having your basic needs met, traffic management. But there's something very close to my heart, which is a very real issue for San Fernando, and that is the business environment. We have been neglected like no other constituency. Businesses are near death point. There is no entertainment for our youth. Our children leave our parents' homes and drive up a highway to drive down in the dangerous night looking for some form of reprieve and entertainment. Yeah. Our businesses don't see $1 in circulation, yet San Fernando and Gulfview, look outside to our entrance and watch billions of dollars of expenditure in front of your eyes. Because that highway is both a benefit and a curse. We have not seen the benefit of a single dollar in San Fernando. Randall can tell of the same story in San Fernando East. Stuart, a little bit different because Port of Spain has received some fair share of development. But we have not seen in our constituency the kind of circulation that people tell us all the time existed under a PNM regime. And they tell you, business owners, hardware owners, restaurant owners, they tell you, boy, under a PNM government, don't mind we didn't support the PNM, but we saw the dollar circulate in our society. And what we say in the PNM is that our fundamental shift is to happen through simple tweaks. That thing which they malign the other side and say to us is not a good idea. Those things which they malign, transportation to and from San Fernando by ease. For those of us that nurse 3 hours of traffic to and from work a day, that means a lot to us. For those of us who know that local government can very well do with $1 so that our lots are cut and our drains are cleaned and our road humps are built and we have more than 25 municipal policemen, that means a lot for us. For those of us who are looking for a San Fernando waterfront development, to see entertainment come alive, to see businesses come alive, to see San Fernando collected into some form of order where we have no parking, where we have government ministries fragmented left, right and center, where you have an immigration office which makes sure that people who live around Todd Street and that whole area can't even get into their homes day or night. We know that the PNM policy solutions are very real in terms of improving our quality of life. So ladies and gentlemen, the point here tonight is to tell you that we learn very well in our opposition years. The PNM is very, very good at looking at itself and coming up with policy. And for those of you who want to know, our policy is not only an improvement of pre-existing policy, but it is tailor-made to the particular circumstances of Trinidad and Tobago right now. We are very well aware that we are facing an election. San Fernando West, it has taken me 9 to 10 months to walk this constituency. I want you to bear in mind that you'll be asked to consider an opponent as yet unidentified 5 Sundays as we stand now away from a general election. And I want to ask you whether there will be courtesy and respect shown to San Fernando East, San Fernando West, whomever it may be. Will there be any respect in a proposed representation by somebody who hasn't even had the courtesy to come and meet you at your door and to learn of your issues? We are serious in the PNM. Our policy will be articulated in great detail very shortly. We want to make sure that this is a two-way conversation tonight, but suffice it that we have a political leader who is unafraid to be interrogated, who is unafraid to have open microphones on the floor throughout this country, And he comes and he has us, newcomers as we are, some of us with a couple years in batting experience, some of us with long years in batting experience. We have 6 members of parliament who have served previously in our lineup of 41, just 6. As representational members in the lower house of representatives. This is not a party unafraid of its history. We are buoyed by a leader who has some confidence to tell us that it is time that we take ourselves by our bootstraps and manage to live by discipline and production in particular. We promise to be strong representatives for the people under the Representation of the People's Act. Gulfview, we have a lot of questions that we expect from the floor, and I will say not much more than to say welcome to San Fernando West, to everyone on the World Wide Web. We are here to stay. God bless you all.
Thank you, Faris Al-Rawi. As you could appreciate, San Fernando West, that is going to be representation. Is that correct? Is that what you want? Our next speaker is none other than the political leader of the People's National Movement, Dr. Keith, and the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. You know, I was going to say that and I say, let me wait. We just have a month to wait again. So, but I agree with you. Let us keep repeating it so we will all do the right thing come September 7th. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know of the accomplishments of our political leader, but let me just say a few of them. He has been a Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Marine Affairs, Planning and Development, and you have heard him talk on many occasions. In fact, he introduced the Vision 2020, which has enunciated the plans for and policy for Trinidad and Tobago. Now we're looking also at 2030. Minister of Housing, and I have to take a minute and share this, you know, Dr. Rowley. In 2007, Vasan Barrett and I was on having a discussion on TV, and rudely he tried to talk about housing. And I had to put him in his place and tell him about the housing minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, who really taught this country about building houses, where we had more than 8,000 to 10,000 houses being built in any 1 year. And you see houses being delivered all this time is houses that the People's National Movement has built. He was also the Minister of Trade. Dr. Rowley has shown tremendous leadership skills. We all know within the People's National Party, he has introduced one man, one vote. What leadership? Isn't that correct, ladies and gentlemen? Put our hands together. Dr. Rowley has led us to victory, Tobago, local government elections, and the by-elections in St. Joseph. So this is a leader, ladies and gentlemen, demonstrated leadership. So when we're looking for a leader for Trinidad and Tobago, who should we call upon but none other, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together.
Thank you very much, Christine, my former cabinet colleague, Christine Sahadio, the Mayor of San Fernando, Alderman Kazim Hussein, and somewhere in the gathering we have the Deputy Mayor, Mr. Alderman Junior Regrello is here with us this evening as well. Members of the Gulf View community, because I gather this is an entirely or almost entirely local audience. I would like also to recognize 5 P&M candidates, and I'm also a candidate. So in your presence this evening we have 6 candidates. Diego Martin West, your humble servant, Labre, Mrs. Nicole Olivier, Faris Al-Rawi on my left, Clarence Rambarat. Over there we have the candidate for San Fernando East, Randall Mitchell, who carried our platform in San Fernando on the promenade last Tuesday and is having a little rest tonight, looking on in San Fernando West. And of course, we have the energetic Stuart Young from Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West. This is a small sample of the PNM's team of 2015. I simply want to open this evening's discussion by making a point that I want all of us to understand. That an election is to select the country's managers. And when you get selected under the Representation of the People Act to manage the affairs of the country, it's not a beauty contest. It's not a fashion show. It's not a party. Because we all can look good if we're properly made up. We all can party if we get the right drinks. But let us not lose sight of the fact that what these elections are about is choosing the managers who will manage the affairs of state for the next 5 years. It is a management issue, and there are two sets of managers in this game. There are the managers in office who, doesn't matter what they feel about themselves, how they look, how they sound, come September 7th, they are saying to all of us, we have done well. Please allow us to continue. That is the question being put to you, who are required to hire the managers. The incumbents are saying to you, we have done well. Please allow us to continue. And there are the other managers from the opposition, which I happen to lead at this point in time, saying to you, they have made a mess of the country's affairs. They have inhibited our potential development. If you allow them to continue, you are going to get at best more of the same and possibly a significant worse. You now have to decide which of these managers you hire. And those of us who are applying for the job, we have to present you with a management team. Any manager who comes to you and keep telling you about I, and is a one-man show, you know that you're starting off on the wrong footing. But on this platform, these managers are saying to you, we are a team. And the team is led by experience. We have a mix of experience and good potential for young people to do better, taking the responsibility for the country, having been well prepared, as Clarence Rambarat has been, as Faris has been, as Nicole Oliver has been, as Stuart has been. We are ready to assume management responsibility for Trinidad and Tobago. But then the question arises, what exactly are we being required to manage? What is the state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago today? Because if you don't diagnose the situation properly, you could make some serious errors with the prescription that could even kill the patient. So you, the electors, have to have a good and fairly accurate understanding of the state of affairs in Trinidad and Tobago today, so as to have a proper expectation of what the next 5 years will bring. Nicole pointed out to you a very simple fact there this evening, where the PNM has tremendous confidence in our people and our country. So when we go to build an LNG plant, we know what shareholding is and what shareholding means. So we take a shareholding in Train 1. And when we did Train 4, we still believe that that shareholding could enrich us in a way that not having a shareholding would do. So we took a shareholding in that. That's just a policy which turns out to be extremely significant in growing the national pie that's available to us. So, let me tell you what our state of affairs is right now. Right now, the level of fiscal irresponsibility in this country means that the government is currently running on fumes. Fumes. The government is not able to properly pay its bills. And there are pensioners who are not even paid their pension because the Minister of Finance is in serious fiscal pressure for the way they have mismanaged the affairs of the country. But even while that is so, they are awarding contracts left, right, and center, even though there are no money in the votes. In one department, $200 million in petty contracts awarded by the minister, supervising with the permanent secretary cooperating, not awarding any of those contracts over $500,000. And of course, the bills have to be paid. So you would have heard that the IPL for Phoenix Park, the IPO, sorry, IPL, yeah, right. I'm still in the Oval. The initial purchase offering for Phoenix Park gas will come to market, and we suspect when we see the prospectus in a few days' time, those shares will be sold at less than what we paid for them. Management style, management to kill, buy shares at a certain price and sell them for less than you pay for them. Try and figure that one out. And secondly, the actual monies will become available on the 10th of September. There will be a new government in the country on the 10th of September. And one of the first things that government will have to do is to take that $1.8 billion from the sale of those shares and pay for all the bills that they're now holding and spending. Because right now, what the Minister of Finance is doing, he's taking money from the banks and wherever else he can get it on short-term credit, building up debt to pay for that one sell-off that's going to take place. That's where we are financially. But let me just tell you something else too against that background. You and I know that the bulk of our bills are paid from earnings from the energy sector. Fortunately, we have hydrocarbons, we sell it, oil and gas, and that provides the bulk of our revenue. So if that sector is not healthy, then the health of the nation, the health of the family, the health of the business is threatened. In the next few days, you would see the Minister of Energy positioning himself to get an award as the best Minister of Energy in the world. There are two of them competing for it, he and somebody from Ohio or somewhere else. But it would be funny if it wasn't so serious. They've done this before. Rupert Griffith was Minister of Tourism, and we spent almost $1 million at the Hyatt to carry out a function to receive an award for Trinidad and Tobago being one of the 3 best tourism locations in the world. The other 2, one was Cuba, and the other one I think was somewhere in the Eastern Europe. But we were getting that award during a state of emergency. Remember that? During the state of emergency, we were receiving an award, and the government looked at us with a straight face and spent almost $1 million for the function, and they came down and gave us the award. Turns out, there were 2 conmen from Slovenia or Slovakia or somewhere who gave Trinidad and Tobago an award under those circumstances. So the Minister of Energy is now in line to get a similar award for being the best minister. Let me point out to you our performance for the first 6 months of 2015 under that minister, who is managing the area of activity that pays our bills. Crude oil is down 6.7% lower than it was in an equivalent period last year, meaning that our production is now well below 80,000 barrels. It's fallen from 82,000 barrels a day to 78,000 barrels a day. That's the crude oil production. Natural gas, which has been going up and down sporadically at Point Lisas, where plants are running as low as 25% below the nameplate capacity. Some of them running at 80%, some at 85%, and sometimes no gas at all. Natural gas production is down 7.5%. This is 3 years after they told us that the gas had declined because of maintenance that will end soon. Now we're hearing that this is going to go on for another 2 years. Then, of course, offshore production is down 2%. That's oil production. Onshore production is down 9%. BP, our major producer, is down 34%. And of course, the price of oil is down to $50 a barrel. Now, that's $50 a barrel. We don't get that. That's the market price. We get less than that for our heavier crude. Now, every time the price of oil falls by $1, we lose about $100 million. There was a time not too long ago where the price of oil was $130 a barrel. So picture where our revenues have gone. Remember I told you, for every dollar that you hear oil price drop, we are in line to lose almost $100 million. So there was a time not too long ago, the price was well above $100. It is now settling in the order of about 50. We might get about 44, 43, depending on, or 44, just about 44 for oil. Why I'm telling you all this is that these managers I mentioned a while ago, the managers of this country, are required under these circumstances to demonstrate fiscal responsibility. Because you're not going to pay the bills by putting makeup on your face. You're going to run this country to see that the first objective is to maintain the quality of life that we have become accustomed to. Because if we demonstrate fiscal irresponsibility, then we will not be able to pay the bills. And when you're not able to pay the bills, it reflects itself in a deterioration in the quality of life. And I don't mean the quality of life for the person in Laventille or Trainline or Enterprise. I mean all of us. When we are unable to maintain what we have achieved, all of us, you the businessman, you the businesswoman, you the professional, you the person on welfare, all of us will experience a deterioration in our quality of life because we will not be able to maintain what we have established so far. So I'm leading a team and calling on the government to maintain fiscal responsibility. And what do you get in response? You get people saying, oh, Rowley is coming to cut this and to cut that and to cut the other. I didn't say that. I simply said there's a requirement for fiscal responsibility. Let me demonstrate to you just one example of how fiscal irresponsibility could affect you. The government is the main driver of this economy. So the government spends money. Every 12 months, the government injects into the economy about $60 billion. That's the average in the last 4 years. Meaning wages, expenses, whatever. Now, that expenditure, you the taxpayer, you the citizen, you want to get the best value for that money that you put in there. You buy a lot of goods and services, and you can only get the best value for money if there's competition among those who supply you. If the managers of the country, as part of their fiscal irresponsibility, waste and corruption, if they do things that don't give you the benefit of competition, then you end up paying more than you should pay for what you are buying. So, let's take the example of the highway overpass in Quebec. You must have heard that they went out to tender for that highway, the overpass. There were two contractors who were the last two standing. One whose price was ridiculously high, and one who wasn't a contractor who had what it takes to do the job. Under those circumstances, the managers of your affairs should have gone back out to tender. What did they do? Unbeknownst to you, it's an overpass, it's a bridge, a glorified bridge. They broke it up into 3 pieces. They gave one contractor the approach from the north side. Give him that. They gave the other contractor the actual bridge. Give him that. Give another contractor the southern side. Give him that. So because they are giving the contract to sole selective arrangements, there's no competition. No contractor in that situation is asked to compete against another contractor. And once the contractor knows that he's given the job, then he gives you his highest price. because he doesn't have to compete for the job. Right? So we're going to build an overpass. It would be a few $100 million, and the contractors were not made to compete and give you the best price. And I'm telling you the reason for that tonight is because somebody has money to give back if the contract was cancelled. And the only way they will not be giving back the money they have before is to try and find a way to award the contract. And that is the best way they could have found. And who is paying the price for that? You, the taxpayer. That is fiscally responsibility. Selling shares lower than you buy them, that is fiscally responsibility. And I could give you a series of examples tonight, but we don't have the time. I think you know enough about that. You know enough to understand that the public affairs in Trinidad and Tobago have not been well managed. And if you want to understand the effects, the ill preparedness of those who are managing our affairs, just look at the record of the current government. We've had 4 cabinet reshuffles. And to fool you, they call them realignments. 4 cabinet reshuffles. The biggest issue in the country is crime and criminal activity. We've had 5 ministers of national security and an almost equivalent number of local government ministers. And of course, we've had a prime minister who is largely absent from the job. I want to give you the assurance here tonight in Gulfview that when you elect the PNM, you put a prime minister on the job who stays on the job working for you. And that prime minister will have a team that will not make it necessary to have a cabinet reshuffle every Monday morning. And that management of the situation, whatever it is, management of your affairs, fiscal responsibility, experience and the exuberance of youth, and boundless faith in our destiny, that we can treat it whatever we meet. Because until a new government comes into office, the full story of what is going on there will not be known to you. Whether this government is re-elected or whether we come into office as a new government, you will not know the new story, the full story, until September going forward. Because the government is ensuring that you don't know, and that you may make the mistake of making a decision in their favor, thinking that the Minister of Energy is really the best Minister of Energy in the world. I say no more for now. I prefer to listen to your questions and your statements, and we'll try to respond to them in a way that we can all leave here better than we came in. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can do better than that. We just got a discourse, a lecture in fiscal responsibility. We didn't get a promise, we got a commitment. I didn't hear a promise, I heard commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we heard. As we said earlier, we are streaming live, and there are lots of questions have been coming in. But you, our audience, we also want to hear from you. So while we wait on, I don't know, anybody ask a question? Can I take one? Okay, you want to go ahead?
Good night to the panel. I'm very concerned with the successive deficit budgets that this country has experienced over the last 5 years, or probably 7 years. And I just want to know if there's any accurate figures to tell us how deep a hole is that? How much money, actually, with all these deficit budgets, how much money the government has to fine or owe, they're owing right now to deal with, because I see that as one of the most serious problems this country would face, whether the PNM wins or the PP wins. I have faith in this present PNM slate. That's why I'm here. You know, that's why I'm here. I'm not. I tell people I'm like a $3 bill, right? I am out of circulation. You hardly ever see me. But I do what I have to do. But I am really, really concerned about this. And if somebody could shed some light about how much money is that right now, I'll be very thankful.
I'm not even sure if it is known to the government. Because that is part of the irresponsibility. I have been in Parliament since 1986. And under this government in recent years is the first time that we were going to the Parliament to conduct the business of the appropriation of money, which we call the budget. And the government of the day does not provide something called a review of the economy, which contains the data that you're asking for from the Central Statistical Office. This government has been managing this country for the last 3 or 4 years without published data from the Central Statistical Office. And therefore, the government is saying to us, we know the numbers, we will tell you, and you just accept what we tell you. So, given the way they have been spending money, hiding money, until somebody else tells us the truth, we just have to guess. But what we do know is that the public debt has increased considerably. And we don't have the final handle as to what it is. And what we also know is that when you are spending more than you're earning, the first thing you do is incur debt. That means you are paying for the bills with money that you're borrowing. That doesn't become a problem immediately, but it's a problem that will assert itself down the road when repayment and revenue begin to clash. And I should tell you, the payment for debt, which we call debt service, has first call on whatever revenues you have. So if, as we go down the road, with the revenues not being strengthened or not being sufficient to pay for what we are doing, we are borrowing money to do it. We are also having to keep our eyes on the fact that somewhere out there, there's a crossing of these two things where we have to now pay the debt. And the revenue had better be there to service the debt. Otherwise, immediately, there will not be enough revenues to do other things like health, and the same health and education they're talking about. If we maintain by debt, then revenues will have to rise to service it so as not to affect other things. The debt load has increased considerably. The last figure I saw was it had gone up from 40-odd billion to 70-odd billion in a 5-year period. In fact, if one look at it in this way, bearing in mind that numbers, the dollar is different over the years, the debt that this government met, it took us 34 years to run up that debt. What they added from 44 to 73, 5 years. 5 years. That should give you an idea. And of course, there may be somebody in this audience tonight who did not vote for the PNM in 2010 and would have been influenced to not vote for the PNM because there was a very strong argument in 2010 against the Patrick Manning regime led by Patrick Manning himself, that the PNM was profligate, spending too much money. That's what that means. That budget was $49 billion. So ask yourself, if in 2010 you were resolute that you had to get the PNM out of office because the Manning administration was overheating the economy by profligate spending at $49 billion, what do you say happened with 54 billion, 58 billion, 60 billion, and 68 billion? Those are the realities. So you started off condemning 49 billion at the start of this government's term. And by the end of the government's term, you were comfortable with 60-odd billion. But the one question is this: what have we got for that record expenditure? And when I spoke about fiscal irresponsibility, Every single budget this government brought was larger than the one before. Every single one was a record budget in Trinidad and Tobago from 2010 to the last one that they brought. Each one being larger than the one before in the face of falling revenues. So while the revenues were drying up, we were making record expenditure. And if that expenditure was going into economic infrastructure and similar things, that was okay. It's quite all right to borrow and spend if you are increasing your asset base. But if that record expenditure had as its partner record corruption, then you know what happened to you. And that's what happened to Trinidad and Tobago. We had record expenditure and record corruption. Record waste. Record favoritism. Record nepotism. So today, you're going up the highway and you see that fancy, the new hospital. Looks great at night with the lights on. That hasn't been paid for you.
Find one doctor for you.
That hasn't been paid for. Well, let's forget the staffing and the use for the time being. But the facility as built, that is debt to be paid to the Chinese down the road.
Bolt arrangement off balance.
Huh? That's an off-balance sheet thing that wouldn't show up for a while. So even though you had the record expenditure, where you do have some physical improvement to show, that is an additional. So that's the environment that we're in.
Thank you for that question. Thank you, Dr. Rowley. It's time from Twitter, and Dr. Rowley, again, it's for you. Are there any plans to modernize the public service through the use of IT infrastructure to improve the quality of the public service?
Well, those plans have already been put in place. We have made a lot of strides in the last few years, bringing government onto technology. So as to, we still have a long way to go because a lot of our public administration is still, you know, some people go and say it's horse and buggy, but I wouldn't say that. But there's a lot that technology can bring to improving our performance. But we are on that track. And the IT gov and its existence and its use, that's the foundation for that. But that is not where the public service problem is. The public service problem is the public service itself that has collapsed. The public service in Trinidad and Tobago has collapsed. In fact, at the level of permanent secretaries, which used to be the bulwark between ministers and good order, that too has collapsed. And one of the first things that the new government has to do is to restore sanity to the public service. We have contract employees in the public service who are the new slaves. Highly qualified, many of them, working with a contract where they can't get a loan, they can't embark on getting a family because they're not sure what's going to happen to them with the turnaround. And the behavior of the administration, where persons have been dismissed by the thousands because they got their jobs under the last government, people are now afraid that the same thing is going to happen to them under a change of government. And that has a tremendous effect on the economy, because if people are not sufficiently confident to make the kinds of expenditure and the kind of investment in the knowledge that their future is secure, that reflects itself in a lower participation in the kinds of things that grow an economy. So we have to give that confidence to people that the public service will not be a place where you park highly qualified or prepared people or people who have got public service jobs, but they are there living in trepidation. And of course, persons who have to carry out public service duties must know that those duties are for a purpose, especially if the purpose has to do with protecting public assets. So that's one area. And we could go further, and we are going further, saying that the service commissions, one of which is the Public Service Commission, require some serious review. And we may very well be moving to a situation, depending on the consultation that we're going to have with the public, whether the service commissions in Trinidad and Tobago have outlived their usefulness, and that the management requirement I spoke of earlier should see us moving to put managers in the police service as against a police service commission, put managers in the teaching service commission, and have these commissions as tribunals to whom people could appeal if they are wronged or if they feel aggrieved. But the actual management of the day-to-day arrangement, the appointments, the disciplines and so, put a proper modern management structures in place filled by managers who are hired to manage. That's where we need to go in 2015. And that is the reform that we're talking about going forward.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We just heard again policies we can expect come September 8, 2015. Yes,
Mr. Rowley spoke about management, and Mr. Ramarat spoke about representation. Now, come election time, and after election, management and representation tend to merge. Because in my opinion, the quest to be a representative is really a sham. And the quest is really to become a government minister, where he now controls part of the government and part of the country, right? My vision for Trinidad really is where a representative stays a representative and sees about his constituency and has nothing to do with the running of the country, because that actually takes away all of the time of the representative in running the country, because the work of a minister is probably far more demanding than the work of a representative. And when you try to merge the two of them, one will suffer. And we've heard many a time where the constituents always say, well, we never see the representative because he or she is always in government, always seeking the interests of the ministry that they're given, and never have time for the constituents, never have time to see about fixing anything, promoting anything for the area or so, right? So my vision is really where we can have representatives dealing with their constituency as representatives and have nothing to do with running the government. And in place of that, we will have professional people who are hired to actually run the government. Because many times, the people who are representatives have absolutely no idea of how to run a ministry. There are some people who just can't cut it. Ms. Oliveri there, she might be a very capable engineer, but is she a good manager? If she wins the election, is she going to be Minister of Energy, right? I'm not saying that she can't, okay? But does she have the time now to run the Ministry of Energy and to see about library at the same time? Same thing with Mr. Ramarat. He's talking about so many things that have to be done in Mearu. Can he do that while he's up in Hayat somewhere or the other, right? So my real vision is for us to leave the representation to the representatives and the ministerial work to some professional minister. Thank you.
That is such a fundamental expectation that it requires a lot more discussion to figure out if that is where we really want to go. Because if I had the time to join this discussion to take it to its logical conclusion, I will begin by asking the question, what exactly is the role of the parliamentary representative? Because you must remember that one of the things that, if you examine that, you may very well find that a lot of local government issues are ascribed to the responsibility of the member of parliament. If you feature local government responsibility as the responsibility of the representative who goes to parliament, you see this monumental impossibility. But I can tell you, we're in San Fernando West. Errol Mahabia was the MP here. And people will tell you he was one of the best ministers that we had in Trinidad. I can tell you that I worked with him. Errol Mahabia. was one of the best ministers of government doing ministerial work. And in San Fernando West, I will hazard a guess that he was also one of the best representatives in our constituency. But because we have to separate the responsibility of local government and parliament. I can tell you as a representative that a lot of the things that come to me, in most instances, I have to send them back to local government. Which is why we are saying what needs to be done to fix this problem is to have proper local government reform. Give local government the responsibility, give them the resources, and give them that right to vote. And if that is happening, you would get less and less of this feeling that the MP who gone to Parliament not fixing the drain. Because the drain is not really the MP's responsibility, unless it has to do with a central government failing or a central government initiative. If the mosquito is not being sprayed, or you have a need for a social service which you're not having, then this really should be a local government function, and we have a local government structure. So once you make local government function as local government, you would see less and less of this need for the member of parliament to try to be all things to all men and women. Because what you're suggesting there, sir, is a different system to the one that we are operating now, and I'm not saying this is the one that we must operate for the rest of our lives, the Westminster system. The system that you ascribe there to is the system that works in the United States, where you have a presidential authority and the president picks a cabinet from whoever, and they are confirmed by the parliament to hold those jobs. And of course, down the road, you have the Congress, where you have people representing people. But they all go to Washington anyway. You have to go somewhere to centralize the work. The senators are in Washington, and the congressmen are in Washington, and the president is in Washington. But the authority is the president picking the cabinet. The members of the cabinet have no responsibility in the states or to do anything about road and drain. They run the management structure under the president, and the representatives are in the houses of the Senate and of the representatives. So we got to figure out if we're going to keep using this Westminster system or another system like the US system. You can't have fish and fowl in the same water or on the same tree. And these discussions will have to take place if you want such a fundamental discussion, change. But we are saying here in 2016, we could make a significant leap forward by having major local government reform, and we're committed to that.
Thanks again. So we hear what's coming September, and thereafter, local government reform if we want to build efficiency. Yes, in the audience? Let me take the question here on my left.
Good evening, everybody. Let me recognize the candidate for Opujis, who is in our presence, Mr. Terry Jadunano.
Where Terry? Oh. Come in green, eh?
And this question is for Mr. Clarence Rambarat. Clarence, I know you have a background in agriculture. And depending on how you answer this question, you may influence Dr. Rowley to give you a position somewhere in agriculture. Clarence, I would like to know, what are your plans for reducing our food import bill in this country? Thank you.
You know, I spoke something last week that really struck me. I struck a chord with a lot of what Dr. Rowley has said, and it has something to do with food production. I saw what looked like a photo of Devant Maharaj, half naked, taking a photo of himself in the mirror. And he was talking about, his post was about how much weight he's lost in the last few months. I said to myself, imagine a minister of government under Dr. Rowley posting a photo like that, when we have serious issues in this country to deal with. I mean, you wouldn't lose weight, you'll lose your job. The fact is that, and I have no, Devant Maharaj is insignificant to me until he talks about me in Parliament and so on, but Devant Maharaj has been a disgrace to this country in terms of that portfolio of food production and agriculture. And the responsibility for Devan's non-performance rests with the Prime Minister. She comes from a rural constituency. She knows that food production is an integral part of the rural economy. Many of us, many of the rural constituencies don't have much to turn to. So that fundamentally, a point I always make is that while agriculture contributes less than 1% of the GDP of the country, agriculture is a significant part of the economy of Moruga, Mayaro, Komoto Manzanilla, Toko, and right around the Eastern Belt. Most people don't draw the link between local food production and health. And I always make the point that in the 1990s, when Brian Kwaitong was Minister of Finance, the budget for national security was under $1 billion. Today we have billions in national security because we did not deal with a problem. Likewise, we have a major health problem facing us, lifestyle diseases. We continue to throw money behind lifestyle issues. And the fact is that we need to create a healthier Trinidad and Tobago. We need to encourage the consumption of local food and vegetables. We need to have local food and vegetables in school feeding. Now, I started last year, June, in Plumita, talking to a group of farmers who I grew up with. And they gave me 22 points about agriculture and what is needed to fix food production. And the 22 points was no different from Vision 20 and was no different from points that were created in the 1950s. The fact is that farmers suffer because of land tenure, water, and somebody in policy making and leadership that would make a difference. We simply lack the will to help farmers because we do not understand the importance of food production to the economy and to the rural economies. So PNM policy, first and foremost, seeks to put agriculture as a priority area, in particular in the rural economies. The second thing is to do what we said we would do in Vision 2020, to deal with land administration, to deal with land tenure, to put all the needs of the farmers under one ministry. What this government has done, it has taken land and thrown it in one corner, marine resources into another ministry, food production somewhere else, and farmers now have to go to different ministries. A simple issue like water, we had a crisis with water in Plumita and Beach recently when WASA decided to charge farmers to use water which was collected on the farmers' lands, water which was used from the rivers. So what we need in Trinidad is not a reinvention of the wheel. We simply need to have the leadership in agriculture. We simply need to do what the farmers are saying to us in the development of food production, and we simply need to understand it is not so much bhaji and pumpkin as Trevor Sudama once said. It is about making this country a healthier country and stopping that crisis in health, personal health, that is upon us, and Fuad Khan pretends it does not exist.
Thank you. So we heard a lot about health policy and food and agriculture policy. Before the next question, I would just like to announce the drive of... I have to just take one question on Twitter here. And it's for the panel. How do you plan to foster hope to those young folks among us who are not just qualified academically, but are also eager to roll up their sleeves in nation building, that the People's National Movement is the best option to the way forward? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that the PNM has been extremely aggressive on our youth campaign. In fact, when you come and you take a little sojourn with us, you come and walk with us, you'll notice that more and more our ground troops are considerably more and more younger. But what we have done is to stimulate a volunteerism aspect. But that's all well and good. That question was more of a national question. I started there to tell you that we are inclined in that direction. That's in the immediacy of this campaign. Take a step back and notice what Dr. Rowley did in terms of presenting to Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity for service at local government structures. Take a look at our local government representatives and you will notice a vast majority of our representatives are young people, and that they are in the midst of some very seasoned people. Let's take another step backwards. Let's look back to the PNM's policy when it comes to GATE and the push that we had in terms of education. Let's now tie some of these points together. We recognize that the food, that the engine, that the fuel for diversification and growth in our economy is education. We recognize that you have to have youthful participation in some form of oriented structure. And a lot of the PNM 2020 vision was geared to stimulating the growth of a middle-class economy. A lot of the PNM enterprise in returning in the last 5 years to the position that we are now. After all, you recall, we were supposedly decimated in 2010. They said we would never recover. The PNM's 29-12 defeat was supposedly as bad as 33-3 in 1986. But look at what brought us back alive. It was our investment in our structures in the party and in our system of governance. When you tie education now to some of what Dr. Rowley said, one of the fundamental shifts that we'll be looking at is to make sure that we move our young people in making GATE efficient, in moving our young people away from unemployment and underemployment into permanency of employment. And that happens through a number of projects, including our local government retooling. Because in our local government retooling, what you're looking at is expanding the local government structure, giving it resources in terms of financial and capital outlay ability, but improving the workforce arrangement so that social work is done by social workers employed in the regional corporation's jurisdiction, so that housing is attended to that way. Psychologists, people who are interested in working in security, for instance, municipal policing, etc. By creating enterprise in a local context, you then begin to get the migration away from underemployment and unemployment in youthful sector into full-time employment. And that's not so far a difficult position, because the Municipal Corporations Act, in case you didn't know, is capable of being amended in some instances by a simple majority. Have we done the homework for municipal corporation retooling? Yes, we have. A lot of investment was done into that in the period prior to 2010. That's one example of taking youthful enterprise and putting it to work. It involves doing social surveys. San Fernando West is engaged right now in all of our constituencies in doing a survey by asking people to come forward and say, tell us what your qualifications are. Tell us how unemployed you are. Tell us what your skills are. Tell us how underemployed you are. And let's try and put a bottle onto each cap. Let's try and match resources across the plate. Because what troubles Trinidad and Tobago is inefficiency. It isn't that we don't have money to do what we want to do. It is that the system has what some people call in a fancy way too much leakage. And the reorientation that we're looking at, which will shore up and improve the fate of young people in particular, is to better orient the leakages in the system away from where they are and engage in what we call proper targeting, to make sure that the resources hit the communities like Gulfview well, to make sure that people are employed well. But you can't do that unless you have your manpower audit, unless you have your social survey, unless you have your targeting right. You're missing the boat. And that's where targeting means jobs and encouragement for people to come on board. So the wrap-up answer is multifaceted targeting, including volunteerism. I heard Theoka, I'll just call her that, simply, young lady who received the Queen's Award, extol the virtues of volunteerism. All of us here tonight are volunteers. Dr. Rowley is the leader of the opposition, parliamentarian with 30 years odd experience. The rest of us don't receive a cent to do what we do because we're not the leader of the opposition. He is the only member right now who receives a salary and performs actually. In fact, they took away his salary. Let me correct that. I forgot he was thrown out of Parliament and doesn't receive any money. And I should know better, Stuart and I. But the rest of us, ladies and gentlemen, engage in offering ourselves for government. Do this as volunteers. And it's time to strike a chord of civil service spirit in Trinidad and Tobago to tell people, step forward as volunteers, but to also say, another cause which Dr. Rowley champions, those who are prepared to work have to be paid properly. And there's no shame in saying, pay your people properly so that they can do the job with honesty whilst inspected under a transparent system. So it starts with volunteerism. It involves local government reform structure and efficiency targeting. And the key is to get the system of the country moving in a better direction. Thank you.
Friends, well spoken. Our next Member of Parliament for San Fernando West.
Good night to the panel. This question is to Faris. Faris, what plans do you have for alleviating the traffic gridlock in San Fernando and Marabella? And have you consulted with your running mate for San Fernando East on the subject?
Well, you've asked one of the golden questions for San Fernando. Traffic circulation and gridlock, San Fernando East, San Fernando West, Pointe-a-Pierre, Oropouche East, it's all the same. We live in a gridlock. A lot of it has fallen helter-skelter because in 2010, the developmental plans which were on the table for San Fernando large were dismantled and thrown away. We lost in San Fernando West a car park in San Fernando for 1,600 odd persons. We lost an administrative center, now teaching hospital, which by the way is the most expensive hospital ever built in Trinidad and Tobago. It's $12 billion per bed. They said 12 million, sorry. The billions fall out. Thank you, Dr. Rowley.
I mean, we know they're bad, but they're not that bad.
They're not that bad. $12 million a bed, and they said that the Scarborough General Hospital was $2 million a bed and was expensive. So we lost our administrative center. We therefore lost the opportunity to put all of the fragmented government services that we have in San Fernando proper into a location. We lost the car park to go with it. And we did not see the waterfront develop as it should have developed in 2010 go forward. In fact, all they did was to build one big fence along the road and let the grass grow higher than the fence. That's all that they did. We then saw $6 million spent to put some benches and solar lighting in an area along the shore next to the Hatter's pan yard. And instead of putting lighting where people live in the wharf for the last 40 years, you put it to make sure that nobody who sits there at night gets light. So that was 2010. The government then engaged in a traffic engagement arrangement through the highway. But we also lost the redevelopment of the PTSC terminus and the water taxi expansion that should have gone there. And we did not control local government for the first 3 years of our existence. Where are we now? What are the plans in answer? Yes, we are in consultation. San Fernando East, San Fernando West, Pointe-a-Pierre, Oropouche East. We are in proper consultation. But the state of the government of Trinidad and Tobago's planning is unknown to us. What has been committed, where the relocation aspect should go, and any responsible government has to get into its saddle with plans as we have. We have a wish list that we'd like to see put into effect, but we now need to see what we're meeting when we get there. We know what San Fernando needs. We need some centralization of certain services. We need relocation of certain services. We need to implement the traffic circulation plans that we had since 2010, prior to 2010, but we now need to see what has been committed. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to meet a black hole. Now, a black hole is an interesting experience in nature. We need to figure out which end of it we're on. Are we where the light goes in, or are we where the light comes out? What are our resources? What is the gravitational flux? So we have a lot of analysis to do. But, ladies and gentlemen, if I could just say this. The reason why I asked Dr. Rowley for the privilege of representing San Fernando West, not that he would say yes or no, it was up to the screening committee, but I asked him to consider it because San Fernando West also deserves to have a member of parliament who's prepared, Doc, get ready for this, to fight his own government for San Fernando West's fair share of the pie. Because we have had a long period of existence where we've had good MPs, but San Fernando, polite as we are, San Fernandians as we are, we don't really make as much noise as the rest of Trinidad and Tobago. And it's also time for us to make sure that our southern city, once home of an energy chamber, which left San Fernando, once home of so many proud citizens, some of whom have gone elsewhere, that we get our fair share of the pie, but we do so with discipline and order and understanding, which is where we intend to communicate on a regular basis. One commitment as I end is to never be that once-in-a-5-year politician that I've heard about all through San Fernando West. This requires constant conversation and constant interaction, because I'm sure that people will understand if they are shown the line of sight and commitment, traffic being one of them. Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much. 2015, 2020, 2025. In the back there, a gentleman had his hand up for a long time. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
And then
Doc, we have an epidemic in Trinidad which people don't seem to want to talk about, and that is noise. And I think all the people here tonight will empathize with what I'm about to say. In San Fernando, in Gulfview, in St. Joseph Village, in Vista Bella, the noise is pervasive every weekend. And I think all over Trinidad. Last week, I went to Millennium to play golf, and I could hear the noise on the golf course from Eastern Main Road and from Piaco Village. In St. Joseph Village, where I live, it can start on a Saturday evening and go right on to Monday morning. The Brian Lara Stadium, the Manny Ramjohn Stadium, the Petrotrin place at Guacara Park, down here, Skinner's Park, across the island, and it can go right through until 7 o'clock in the morning. And nobody seems to want to do anything about it. You talk to the cops, they say, not our business, we can't do anything about it, the laws don't allow us to do anything. You call the MA, they say, well, we can't do anything, go to court. And it only gets worse. I've been into your constituency in Dio Martin, up on top of the hill there. Those folks, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, noise, across the country. Are we planning to do anything about it when we do move back into government in September?
We were in government before, eh? And the country wasn't quiet. What that points to is a general, all-pervasive problem in Trinidad and Tobago, and that is a failure to effectively implement the laws and regulations that we have agreed to be governed by. You see, people are the product of their culture, whether it is food, music, art, or behavior. We have as part of our culture something called how you going to demand that? And that supersedes the rules and regulations. And it is not that we don't know what we have to do, it's where we do it. If you go to England, the average Trinidad and Tobagonian, we know exactly how to use a line, you know. But in Trinidad and Tobago, what are you telling me I home? I went to a fete in New Mexico one night with some strangers, took me to a fete, and I was enjoying the party. After I was there for half an hour, and then I saw two cops in front of the door talking to the owner of the fete, and then I looked to see what was going on, and the cop said to me, go back. In other words, I'm not talking to you. And I'm stepping back and I'm listening. He said, the cop is saying, everybody out of here, or I'm taking everybody down. And I'm saying, I don't know where I am. I don't know where down is, but down had to sound like trouble. And within 15 minutes, the fete was over. Because the neighbors had complained that the time had passed and the noise level was too high. And the cops came and took the relevant action. In Trinidad and Tobago, I guess you might lose your seat if you enforce the law. But we have to go to a situation where we've made regulations and we agree to be governed by them. And the people who are required to ensure that we are governed by them simply have to follow the regulations and do a job. Otherwise, we'll complain. This has nothing to do with the government. It has nothing to do with paying and come back into office. It happens all the time across the country. We enjoy a good fete, but we also have total disregard for the rest of us. The next government, which I expect to lead, is going to have a label. And that label is, we are improving the quality of our lives. And whether that has to do with the food we eat, healthy food as Clarence talked about, or the transportation system preventing you from spending half a day and half a night in traffic, or in being able to afford the basics if you are at the bottom of the financial pyramid, or if you are pestered by the noise, what we should do now is to take a pause and embark upon doing all the kinds of things that we could and should do, with the target being improvement in the quality of our lives. Because spending a lot of money and saying how much you spend and spending that, that's not really life and quality of life. Because there might be people who have a whole lot less, but they have a better quality of life because of what they encountered during their waking or sleeping hours. So that's something that I would want to push. And I'll tell you one thing, I heard Faris talk about fighting for San Fernando. I want to give you the assurance that my interest in San Fernando is not only confined to Kalicharan's band. I've spent a lot of my formative years in San Fernando. I had a lot of family here. I used to have an uncle and an aunt and lots of cousins, and so before I got involved in the political arena that eats up all your time, I still remember the favorite days. You know, Friday evening I was free, and from Friday evening until Monday morning, San Fernando was available, and the quality of life in San Fernando was almost as good as Tobago. So we know what the good life is in San Fernando, and the good people of San Fernando should benefit from good management and setting ourselves the target of general life improvement.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rowley. So as the quality of life improves in Trinidad, we give Tobago a little run. As the quality of life also improves in Trinidad. I think across here we had a question.
I actually came to the meeting here this afternoon to put forward a question to the panel, each of you actually. And the good gentleman in front of me actually beat me to it by speaking to the food import bill. And I would just quickly ask the questions individually and you can answer in turn. Mr. Rambrat, specifically to my arrow, and we talk about management issues, which has been the issue, the topic raised by Dr. Rowley. The medium-term policy framework 2011-2014 set out certain targets for agriculture and food security for Trinidad and Tobago. The food import bill was one, the rate of food price inflation and all these other things, I'm sure you're very familiar. There's something happening in Trinidad and Tobago now that does not seem to catch much of attention towards policymakers, but it gets the sensation on the internet and so, which is an exogenous factor, not a management issue, but the influx of the sargassum seaweed, all right? And those of you online would have seen it at Speyside, Tobago, but we can't recognize Speyside anymore. It's coming to Mayaro and so forth. Assuming that with the support that you get to be the representative for Mayaro come the morning of September the 8th, how will you treat with such an issue, number one, and two, what will you do going forward to build the resilience of fisherfolk and farmers? Let's start in Mayaro, towards treating with these exogenous issues, and then beyond that, the management issues as you described. To Mr. Alwari and Mrs. Oliver, your constituencies border on the Gulf of Paria, and we have known and accepted that over time the Gulf has become the endpoint for industrial waste, most recently the oil spills and so forth. All right? And we have, living on the periphery of this open access resource, fishing communities, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. We don't need to describe them. But the persons living there, of course, can you share with us just maybe one action that you will personally champion to better the economic fortunes of persons in fishing communities? All right? And to Dr. Rowley, finally, I know you've had experience across several ministries, agriculture, housing, planning, and so forth. And you are very familiar with rural and coastal Trinidad. And the People's National Movement are proposing certain housing policy and changes as well going forward, which I'm certain will come, which will be revealed via your manifesto in short order. The persons in these fishing communities and rural Trinidad and so are looking forward right now with your proclamation of or your intention, statement of intention to create a Ministry of Rural Development. And these persons that I'm trying to describe here in rural and coastal Trinidad live within, a lot of them live within certain physical spaces that would need certain developments in terms of even wastewater systems, the condition of the homes, and all these other things, right? What it is can these people expect or look forward to benefit from maybe after September the 8th, given the assumption that they cannot enter any formal credit market to develop their own housing arrangements? Thank you.
Thank you very much. To answer the question on the seaweed first, this country has produced a brilliant scientist by the name of Dr. Roger Pulwati, who's an expert on climate change. And the fact is that the approach when the seaweed came on shore this time around was that it might be a one-off situation and it was nothing to worry about. It will land on the shore and we would tolerate it for a while and maybe truck it after a while and all of that. The fact is that everything points to this seaweed being part of our lives. And that is what makes it a very important consideration on the coastal areas. Now, I myself was shocked to see what has happened in Speyside. I mean, I've been all over the place talking about the impact of it on my 17 miles of coast from Manzanilla to Mayaro. The fact is that it's nowhere near what I've seen in Speyside. So on the very first thing is that we have to understand how pervasive this issue is going to be, and I believe that we're gonna face it every year. The second thing, and it stretches across seaweed to agriculture to fisher folk, is that we have to understand what are the inherent risks to these industries or these activities. Now, in agriculture, we shouldn't wait until the annual rainfall and the annual damage from flood to the farmers to decide what we are going to do in terms of risk management. In terms of risk management and compensation. So we have to deal with risk, including the risk of the seaweed up front. From what I've seen in Speyside, we may have to look at what the oil companies are doing in terms of spill containment. We have to look at ways in which we can capture and move the seaweed. We have to look at what are the options. Some people believe that the seaweed is a source of manure. The people in Mariaro have said to me, don't waste your time with that. It's not going to work. So it's something we have to understand how pervasive the issue is going to be. What are the options and how do we deal with containment? How do we reduce the impact on the shores? And what I've been across the country talking about, we have to face up front the issue of compensation. It's not only the hoteliers in Tobago, it's every tourism entrepreneur on the coast and everybody involved in fishing who's being affected in a serious economic way by this seaweed. Now, in Mayaro, my constituency was severely affected by the ban in hunting. Now, I'm not getting into the pros and cons of whether hunting should have been banned. What I said as a columnist back then and what I say now is that my community should have been consulted. I heard somebody in the media saying, you know, these hunters should be retrained. Retrained as what? Hunting is it's a livelihood. It's something that is in their blood. And for each hunting family in my constituency, it's represented a loss of income of $60,000 a year. So that lack of consultation and lack of understanding of how these activities are important to rural economies is what have us in this crisis at this time. So it's not a complex issue. It's not a new issue. The seaweed is a growing issue, but the challenges facing agriculture are not new. The challenges facing fishing is not new. For example, I was at the town hall meeting in January with somebody who aspires to be my opponent but may not even make it to that point. And he said, we've constructed a new fishing port at Galeota at a cost of $60 million. And Marlon Hopkinson said, US or TT? And he said, it doesn't matter. And on June 12, 2012, Kevin Ramnarine, who is struggling to be the candidate for Komoto Manzanilla, cut a ribbon to that $60 million US or TT facility in Galeota. Not one fish has landed. Not one. Our fisher folk in Guayaguayari remain exactly where they were. If you took the 3-hour massage up the road and you got to Guayaguayari, you would see 50 or 60 pirogues parked in the dock, each with about $100,000 in equipment sitting there, vulnerable to everybody. And that is because nobody had the decency to consult with the fisher folk in Guayaguayari to ask them where this fishing port should go, what it should look like, and what it should contain in order to help this community. So that is what we need in this country. Whether it's the seaweed, hunting, fishing, agriculture, we need to consult, we need to listen to the people whose livelihoods are at stake, and we need the will to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Rambarat. That was very, very comprehensive. So we see, ladies and gentlemen, we already have our candidates ready to represent you at your various constituency level, the constituency of Mayaro, right in front here. Yeah.
Christine, sorry. Put out. Oh, so if we just answer quite quickly to the others.
I humbly apologize.
Sorry, I'll try to keep it quick on my answer. I can build a lot on what Clarence has said. Suffice it to say, San Fernando has, in its most vulnerable pockets, a seashore that is very valuable. Be it the squatting community at the Hatter's Panyard, be it our squatting community at Mbakade, be it the squatting community at the wharf, be it the squatting community all the way up Bayshore along the train line. In fact, approximately 5,000 odd people live right there. It's a large chunk of San Fernando West. It's a very serious issue for us. The wharf consultation was done prior to 2010. Some of the consultations were also done along Bayshore, etc., and in Mbakade. All of that stopped. It is a #1 priority because the diversification of San Fernando, in particular through the redevelopment of the waterfront areas going north and south, are all tied in to livelihood. We intend to put into effect, after analyzing what the government actually has purchased for us on their version of waterfronting, what the fishing community is going to look like there, because it's a very viable source of income for our people, hugely viable, and provides jobs that the people in these communities ask for. They don't ask for handouts, they ask for solid jobs, and they're very interested in being entrepreneurs in fishing and in particular in agriculture, both of which lend itself that way. So I will just join Clarence in saying that the consultation is quickly required. Secondly, it's a huge item on our checklist. And thirdly, we understand, particularly for me, my entire coastline, some 5,000 odd people, not including the extended relations, depend upon their livelihood there. So it's no small issue for us. Nicola.
Now, in addition to what Clarence and Faris have just said, what the fisher folk really require would include protection of the nurseries for the fishing stock. They need a limitation on the use of and the extent of deep-sea trawling, which impacts on their catch. And they also need enforcement of the Environmental Protection Act to limit pollution of our waterways, which would impact on the fishing stock.
And let me just wrap that up by taking my question, which has to do with this Ministry of Rural Development. There's a minister who will have as portfolio responsibility rural development monitoring, which means whatever is allocated, particularly in the development program, that minister will have the requirement to ensure that it is delivered to the people for whom the Parliament has made the allocation. And this will be in the context of the same quality of life notion that I've raised early on, driven by an understanding that a child growing up anywhere in the rural district must have the same opportunity to develop to his or her potential as a child growing up in an urban environment in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore the basics, at least, that are required for that to happen must be in those communities. And that would be the responsibility of the Minister of the Rural Development, to see that rural development acknowledges that there are communities in the country which have been pretty much left behind or have been moving too slowly. And I think I understand it very well, because I grew up in Mason Hall in Tobago. And I came out of Mason Hall in Tobago as a result of public policy that was successful. I went to school without shoes and I didn't think anything about it until I came to Queen's Hall and met all these guys from Fatima and KRC showing off and talking about what wonderful life they were having. And I look back on where I came from and saying to myself, yeah, but you guys ain't got nothing on me. Right? But you have to have the opportunity where being in a rural district doesn't mean that you're condemned to being second class. Quality of life. And a minister would have the responsibility for the insertion of what it takes to ensure that persons in those communities get what the country has for them, because understand, the bills are paid by an ownership arrangement where we all have a claim on the national patrimony. We all have a claim on the national patrimony. And if a child is growing up in Toko, in Felicity, or wherever the case might be on the coast, or down in Deep Maruga, that child has a claim. And that Minister for Local Government Development, for Rural Development, has the responsibility of ensuring that that child's interest is protected in the allocation of state resources.
Thanks again, panel. That was very comprehensive. We heard a lot of policy being enunciated. Okay, we will have a...
Thank you, Christine. Well, first, let me just say to Dr. Rowley that I appreciate your discourse on the fiscal responsibility of the government. Now, Christine was also saying that you just didn't make promises, you made a commitment. So I want to put it to you three things. I want you to commit that the government you lead will not engage in having recurring fiscal deficits as one. Recurring fiscal deficits. You may need to have a fiscal deficit, but recurring, that's a problem. Two, that the state and quasi-state enterprises will not have interlocking directorships. And three, that the government or state does not co-opt the said state and quasi-state enterprises to do the bidding as how the government has co-opted NGC, along the same lines as how Venezuela has co-opted PDVSA, Brazil has co-opted Petrobras, and Malaysia has co-opted Petronas to do their state bidding. Thank you.
Well, that intervention tells me that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are paying attention. Let me start with the first one. I cannot give you, and I ought not to give you, a commitment that there will be no fiscal deficit. And there's nothing inherently wrong with a fiscal deficit. In fact, there are many countries that for decades have been running deficits. But you have to have two things in place. If you're running a deficit, what is happening with the money you're spending? And secondly, there ought to always be a plan to get out of the deficit situation. It is when you have no plan that you get downgraded. Jamaica was upgraded recently, you know. While Jamaica was being upgraded, Trinidad and Tobago was being downgraded. And the reason for that is that the IMF, the Moody's, Fitch, and so on, they looked at us, they saw Jamaica with a plan, even though they were in a deeper hole than Trinidad and Tobago, but they had a plan to get out of the hole. Trinidad and Tobago was not down in that hole, but they had a shovel digging a hole. So that's what happened there. So what we will do, we will use our understanding of fiscal responsibility to ensure that we don't contract the economy with stupid talk about empty treasury. Make sure that there's confidence in our ability to use the resources we have, and we will have in place people who understand that with fiscal deficits, you also have to have a plan to put an end to fiscal deficit budgeting. And then the other question you raise is the question of interlocking directorate. Again, and this opens a nice conversation. I don't know how many people in this audience will want to serve on a board. Because if you do, you will have to be subjected to the Integrity in Public Life Act, which has brought no integrity to public life and has brought tremendous amount of discomfort to qualified people who will have nothing to do with public service in public life. So we have to address, we have to look at the Integrity Commission, and that's one of the areas that needs to be reviewed to ensure that there's oversight of public officials in the spirit of the law and the letter, but also not becoming an impediment to getting the right people to serve on those boards. Because if the right people are not there, then certainly the wrong people can be there. And of course, if you want to get the best out of the nation, you should also want to get everybody involved. So we committed to that, including reviewing the Integrity in Public Life Act to see what we can do to make it more effective in overseeing the conduct of persons in public life while not being an impediment to persons who would want to serve. And the last thing you mentioned, which is the cancerous growth of the state enterprises. You see, good things do turn bad if they are allowed to go astray. I think I have no fundamental problem with the state enterprise sector. But if you allow the state enterprise sector to become the plaything of the politicians and the political directorate without proper supervision and oversight, then you could end up in a calamity. When I was fired from the Ministry of Trade for taking issue with UDICOT it was for addressing the very concern that you have, which is that the state, through the public service, and I dare say the cabinet, had ceded its authority and its responsibility to state enterprise areas, where persons in state enterprise had even become bigger than ministers. And right now we had an additional problem where the cabinet has seen state enterprise sector as the place to do all the un-cabinet things. And I give you the assurance that that will be addressed by the next government, starting with appointing proper people to boards and not allowing boards to run riot with public assets in the way that the boards have done in this term, this 5-year term.
Thank you, Dr. Rowley, for enunciating your policy on good corporate governance, good governance. I think right here in front I've been ignoring.
Good evening, everyone. I was trying very hard to stay quiet, but not having heard any females speak, and there are so many of us present, I think it is incumbent upon me to say a few things. Faris, I'm glad to hear Dr. Rowley end in the manner in which she did, because I was about to tell you, let not your heart be afraid. There has been precedent in the PNM for someone challenging the leadership on good grounds, and we'll see the evidence of it here today, so go brave, my friend. Ms. Oliver, unlike you, I've had an interest in politics since I was 6 years old. But I have been vacillating for one reason or the other. But like you now, because of the prevailing circumstances, I have decided to take the plunge. And unlike my friend, Mr. Bathley, I'm not a $3 bill. In South, at least, I'm like a $20 bill. Constant. I'm certainly circulating. And Dr. Rowley, we all share your concerns about our patrimony. And I have considered myself a Caribbean girl from the time I was 6 years old and heard Sparrow sing Federation. Didn't know what he was talking about, but it stirred something in me. And I was extremely happy when the Caribbean Court of Justice was established. A lot of our patrimony is being spent on the upkeep of this court. I would like a commitment from the People's National Movement that when we get into power, that we will establish the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal.
On the subject of the Caribbean Court of Appeal, Caribbean Court of Justice, this is just probably the perfect example of Trinidad and Tobago as a nation just playing the fool. The PNM was in the opposition when the UNC took us into the Caribbean Court of Justice with PNM support. Fact. So much so that we lobbied for and got the headquarters of the Caribbean Court of Justice located in Charlotte Street in Trinidad and Tobago. Then an election came. The UNC lost the election, went into the opposition. The PNM came into the government. We had signed the treaty. We were in it. And the next thing we know, as a result of the outcome of the election, the UNC changed its position that it will not support the Court of Justice. Now, to accede to the court in its full jurisdiction, appellate and original, you require a certain number of seats in the parliament. That's right. Once those seats are not available to the PNM, it would require a change of position on the part of others. What we can undertake to do, and I give you the commitment tonight, we will take the matter to the Parliament. And we will seek to convince our colleagues in the Parliament by rational argument that there is benefit to the people of Trinidad and Tobago to have the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. We hope to be persuasive. If we are not, then it will not go forward. If we are, then it will go forward. Because it is a work in progress where people have just changed their position by new developments. I know that there are some people who believe that it ought not to happen. But there were those who felt the same about independence. And I can tell you, going to London to get justice is the purview of a few people. The average person in Trinidad and Tobago cannot get justice in London because they cannot on the 10-to-1 exchange. You hire a lawyer in London and charge you £10,000, that's £100,000. Charge you £100,000 is $1 million. So you don't bother to go there. Those who have access and who can afford it, the final court is theirs. So don't be surprised if you hear people saying they don't want any change. And insofar as saying that the judges are not of the English quality, I take umbrage at that. I take umbrage at that. Because there's no support for that. And the examples that are raised as to what decisions were coming from the Privy Council, that is like saying, it's not a logical argument. Because unless you can show me, as a trained scientist, that those same things would have gone to the Caribbean Court of Justice and get a different decision, then the argument can't hold. And we can show you good Caribbean Court of Justice that will find commendation in London. We have to have confidence in ourselves. And we of the PNM, we have confidence in the region's ability to provide the quality on the bench and even access it from outside the region as we're doing now, to ensure that our people have the best people on the bench. And we believe in the words of our anthem, boundless faith in our destiny. We have faith that we can do it. So it's nobody's secret. Everybody knows that the PNM supports the Caribbean Court of Justice as our final court of appeal. Just as we supported the Federation, Bustamante and the others didn't support it. There are many days in this region where we ask ourselves, what nation would we have been had we been the Caribbean nation as a federation? Let's ask yourself. Suppose we had survived as a Caribbean federation in today's world, we would have been a far, far better off people. So it's common knowledge, and we will make the effort in the Parliament, and hopefully a different leadership in the opposition will support what we think the nation has committed to, which is to support what we have. We have $200 million in trust fund. Trinidad and Tobago money is there, funding it, but not supporting it. That's what I call playing the fool.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I know there are a lot of questions. I don't know, panel, if you want to continue, but I've been told the curtain has to come down.
I think what happens is that we were streaming live, and it stops at a certain point. But there's nothing to prevent us talking a bit longer with our people here.
Great. So we just
Dr. Rowley, every 5 years we have political parties coming around to ask us for our support. And they make us promises. But after the election, you don't see them anymore. You don't see nothing happening. As Ravi have said, Paris, that you see nothing happening right now in San Fernando. The only exception to that was when, under the PNM, Junior Regrello became minister in San Fernando West. And under his leadership, we, the residents of Gulfview, got this building here. Right. It was under Junior Regrello and the PNM. And the only thing you can see if you walk around San Fernando, the only development that you can see done by any political party is this building, which is used by the Gulfview Resident Association and everybody else in San Fernando. So the PNM built it and the PNM finished it, but it was opened by the next government, some 2 months after. Now the people, the national movement, also started that big playing field across the highway. That massive structure that you see there, millions of dollars have been spent, and it's just standing there incomplete because the government changed. Now, Dr. Rowley, when you when you become Prime Minister, I want to make sure not that you will finish that stadium, but you will finish it quick. Because the red steel is making, roads, and we would like to get some activity here in San Fernando. You could imagine. You could imagine how much economic activity will be created in San Fernando if red steel come down here on that cricket ground. That is one. And the next question I want to ask you is, all the politicians coming here talking about the wharf. They're going to make San Fernando, the wharf, the center of San Fernando. I would like to know, Dr. Rowley, what you can do to accomplish that feat. Thank you.
Well, with respect to the government is a continuum, and I don't like to personalize accomplishments of the government. If you're part of a government, decisions are made in a variety of ways, but all to the national good. It was unfortunate that some people felt that because something was started under a previous government, it had to be left the way it has been, to be seen as a beacon of the previous government's failure or inability to make good decisions. That, to me, is not how you develop a country. Even if you might not have agreed with the initial decision, but a lot of public monies have been spent. What it says to me is that if you cannot finish a cricket pitch, I'm not surprised that you made a mess of the country. And if that was a singular event, a singular instance, you would have said, well, okay, there's a particular problem there which they couldn't solve. But look across the street at Petro-Trin, and you see that head office building left there to the elements, millions of dollars of taxpayers' money being left there to the elements as though you couldn't do anything about it. At least you could have covered and clad the building. And if you come down to my constituency, we talk about fishing all night here, and who had coastline. I've got more coastline than all of you. You'd meet the Carnage Fishing Complex as a skeletal reinforced concrete structure, the same way this government met it in 2010. Not a brick, just the same way the government met it. It's there right now. And they cut the grass once during the term of 5 years. Now, this is not a question of no resources. Because after you spent $60 billion a year, you can't tell me, as the Prime Minister told the Parliament, our Prime Minister is on record in the Parliament at my urgings that the work will start in a week's time. The money has been approved twice by the Parliament to do it. It wasn't done. As for them to explain to the people of Carnage, because I know what to tell the people of Carnage, it was discrimination. But it resulted in the people of that district not having a facility which they ought to have had. The same way you could have had red steel, you could have had red fish. And the same way you go to Barbados and you go to Oystins on a Thursday or Friday, Saturday night, and great economic activity, the fish pie, and you drink your Banks beer, and they play the music and so on. That was the plan in Carnage. That has not happened. But it will happen very early in the term of the next government, as the red steel will play in Taruba. Very early, because we can finish a cricket pitch.
Thank you. Well spoken. I think we have a question here.
Thank you very much. Good night, panel. Forgive me, we've heard a lot about fiscal irresponsibility and all the other things which are very important, but I have just 3 brief snippets that anyone can respond to. First off, Faris, a question was put to you about energizing the youth and giving them hope and all of that. My question has to do with the first question has to do with education, and I'll make it very brief because I want to fit as much in as possible. What are we going to do with our education system? I know we can't detail that, but general quotes. We talked about volunteerism and a sense of patriotism and a sense of service and all of that. Yet we have a school system where most of the kids don't know our national songs. They're not sung every day or every week or for national festivals or anything, the way some of us still remember them being. There's no sense of what I can do for my country. Even within our education system, as a former teacher in a last incarnation myself, you still have a number of children graduating from even secondary school who are not able to read properly. We have even though we have the adult literacy programs and so on, forget about the children now, let's even move on to the adults. There are a number of adults who function, and we talk about retraining, yet they do not know how to read and write properly, so that having to retrain them to make them contributing members of society and get them economically on a sound footing, that needs to be addressed. So that's a big morass. The other thing is our health sector.
Could you hold it there for a moment, because that's such a big part. I don't want it to get lost. What you are talking about there is a pointer to the education system, which is the largest budgetary item on a consistent basis. And if that is so, the question you have to ask yourself is, why are you talking like that? And the reason is that we're spending more and more money on education and getting less and less educated people. And that is because more and more of our children are passing through school, just passing through the school system. And if we are going to change that conversation that you just started there and not have it become center stage as it ought to be, we have to make some fundamental shifts in our education system, starting with the school curriculum. The curriculum is not educating our children. And throwing money at the system is not going to change that. We just get more and more people. And we're trying to fix it by certification. And what we have ended up with now is a situation where false papers washing this country. And it is not an improvement. And that is an area that we as a government have to take the lead and do the relevant interventions with the national consultations to break the cycle of children just passing through school. And this could be a long, long debate. But I didn't want this to get lost. We see it, or at least I see it, as the leader of this team, in the context of a requirement to fix a system where our children are largely passing through school.
Thank you, Dr. Rowley. And as a jump off from that, my next question would be, sir.
Yes,
proper teacher training, yes. But as a jump off from that, you talked about a better quality of life. Unfortunately, my humble opinion is that we have so many things we would like to improve. We have so many existing laws and so on that are there and not properly enforced and so on, and people are not held accountable. But there is an incredibly large amount of legislation that needs to be brought. And what is the position that you would take in terms of that? Because there's so many things that we need to have the laws in place of. For example, just one simple example. We talk about, right now the big debate is about domestic violence, about child abuse, the Children's Authority Act and all that sort of thing. Yet the reality is, because I'm a qualified social worker, the reality is in Trinidad and Tobago, people ask you all the time, so you all can't do anything about that. I don't practice, so I have to say those in the profession. You all can't do anything about a child who's being abused or a situation like that. That's a perfect example. The legislation as it stands now gives the authority to the police. So you have police who are not properly trained to deal with these issues, or if they are trained, it's some minute program or course they've gone to without proper training and research. So you have a social worker having to go to complain to the police and beg the police to go and take a child out of a home, and then It needs to be the other way around. That's just one example. But I'd like to hear the position about a list of legislation that needs to be brought to the Parliament and needs to be put into law to better improve our quality of life in all spheres of the society. Thank you.
Received a little instruction to answer a piece of that. You may have noticed for the last 5 years that the PNM spoke significantly to the government's lack of a legislative agenda. Debate after debate, we were called upon, week anticipating another week, to not know where we were going. We said, look, how can you possibly pick the best laws in the best priority listing if you don't know what your general plan is? And the reason why we asked for a legislative agenda is because the PNM traditionally publishes a legislative agenda as was seen in the years prior to 2010. So I have debated far less than Dr. Rowley, 110 times, 110 debates in the Parliament in the last 5 years. And I never knew on any one week what was coming next. And we get mountains of paper, and their idea was to try and rush us so that we couldn't possibly be ready. And debate after debate, we would shut them down over and over until we fixed it, because we hold the record as an opposition of having supported in the Senate 96.7% of the legislation that came to the Senate. That's unheard of in the history of oppositions in Trinidad. And we did that because we were prepared to do the work. So to answer your question on our legislative agenda, we need to see what the current legislative agenda is in the CPC's department and what work the LRC did. Because you don't just get up one morning and decide, well, I'm going to pass this law. You can do that, and you can reprioritize, but there is a system and flow that ministries have that require legislative push through. Let's take, for example, the Children's Authority, which you mentioned a little while ago. We advocated from day one for the Children's Act and for the Children's Authority to be operationalized, because you can have the very best laws in Trinidad and Tobago, but if they're not operationally functional and efficient, then it makes no sense. Dr. Rowley spoke to the Integrity in Public Life Act. The Integrity in Public Life, the Commission, the Integrity Commission, receives $20 million in funding a year. The Attorney General spent $500 million in legal fees. How can you possibly deal with integrity in public life if it's underfunded? The laws may be decent, but are they making sense? Same thing with the Children's Authority. The Children's Authority needed the Children's Act, but the operationalization was required. Marlene Kudry proudly came into the Senate and said, I gave them an instruction to shut down the Children's Authority because the lease was prepared by Faris Al-Rawi. That was her reason. I was a lawyer who worked with Justice Seeley under her government to give the Children's Authority a lease, because I acted for somebody on the private end. I mean, how sensible can you be to shut down a Children's Authority simply because the lawyer who happened to work on it for the Children's Authority under a UNC government was your opponent? So we need to have some legislative perspective. We also may need to better operationalize existing laws, taking existing laws and feeding them with the potential to come alive, much like local government needs to come alive through proper resourcing. Our legislative agenda is something which we usually publish, but after we have some perspective. So we certainly, I am sure under Dr. Rowley's leadership, would have a commitment to publish a legislative agenda and to share it, because our Parliament needs to work more efficiently. Just on that point, as I end in answering your question, I want to point out to Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa goes all over Trinidad and Tobago trumpeting that she changed the laws, the rules which govern the Parliament, and that for the first time we have Prime Minister's question time. I want to make it abundantly clear. Camille Robinson-Regis and Barry Sinanan were the people that worked on those rules. And the UNC refused to support the reform of Parliament over and over and over again until Dr. Rowley came in this incarnation as leader of the opposition and said, we will support parliamentary reform. And that's how our standing orders were amended in the Parliament, and that lends itself to your legislative agenda, because it is there that we have committees that must have the capacity to supervise the laws. Dr. Rowley brought order to the National Securities Joint Select Committee, which we have for the first time, the Committee of Undertakings, where if you give a promise on the parliamentary floor, a committee must track when the promise comes alive, how it is brought alive, etc. So, far from anything else be the truth, the PNM has not held back reform. We are committed to it, and we certainly are committed to publishing our legislative agenda. Once we have a line of sight that we can share, we will do as we've done traditionally, which is to operationalize institutions with legislative reform.
Well, thanks again. Talking about come September 2015, we will be presenting our legislative agenda. And I know, to bring the curtains down, I will now call on our political leader,
Dr. Keith. Right here.
Sorry, under the light, yes.
I've been here for a while. Just have my hand up, but I probably,
sorry, the light blinds you completely.
Yes, I realize.
We'll take the last question.
Thank you.
But try to be short.
Pleasant good evening. Just two short questions. What's your plans for the young entrepreneurs? And music. I'm a musician. The last regime had Divine Echoes, which I'm a proud member of, the National Symphony, and they were coming out with a dance. I think it was a dance theater or something like that. I'm not sure. So what's your plans for music, if any, Dr. Rowley?
Well, I can't speak to any specific band or any specific activity, except to say that art and culture, those are two areas which, properly supported, can contribute significantly to the overarching expectation of improvement in the quality of life, art and culture. And to go further, insofar as we have talent, and we do have a real large body of talent across Trinidad and Tobago, they can make economic contributions to national diversity, the economic diversification. And we're not required to reinvent any wheel here. We set out on this course. Unfortunately, we lost our way. The University of Trinidad and Tobago had embarked upon fashion and design as an area of economic growth at UTT. And we had to assist us in going in that direction. One of the world's most prominent tailors from Trinidad and Tobago, the only tailor we know who is a professor in London on Savile Row, working with us here at UTT. And what happened to him? He got his name called in Parliament in foolishness, because he must have flown first class to help Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm giving you the assurance that art, culture, fashion and design form part of the future of Trinidad and Tobago's development.
Thank you. Bring us just closing remarks now.
Well, I would like to first thank all of you for giving up your valuable evening and coming out here and taking part in this conversation. And I want to let you know that having come here, I'll leave here better informed, with a better feel for what's happening in San Fernando West and what your concerns are as we formulate policy and offer ourselves to assume responsibility to manage your affairs. So I want to thank you for participating. Being here is an indication to me that you are interested in what happens in Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to the team of people that I'm advancing under the PNM's banner, I want to give you the assurance that they were not picked up by any bar anywhere or they didn't negotiate anything. They were selected by a very rigorous screening process under our party's constitution. Our party is in its 60th year. We have a reform constitution. We've modernized the constitution. We have a very strong screening process that started last September. And as I speak to you now, we have 41 candidates in the field seeking the support of the national community. When you vote for a PNM candidate, it's not a leap of faith. It's not a jump in the dark. it is against a background of a political party with a track record in Trinidad and Tobago. And that record is hugely positive because we are the party that brought development and stability to Trinidad and Tobago. And we want that opportunity to continue doing that. So a PNM candidate runs on a platform of a record and is responsible to a responsible organization. Another pickup sign. We're not held together by any memorandum of understanding. We are the PNM, known to everybody. And we understand how development and public policy can change lives, whether it's in the household or in business. And we want to restore that confidence where money in the bank can be spent in such a way that people believe that there's a bright future and they could invest and take the risk of investing, knowing that the country is in good hands. We have a very strong group of young people. These are the people in whom the country invested at an earlier time. Give them the opportunity to pay you the dividends of your investment of earlier years. Thank you for coming, and please support the PNM.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rowley and the entire team we have here for enunciating policy, the next government's policy, and of course having such a delightful conversation. And all of you have gathered here this afternoon, I want to say a very special thank you for joining us. We're going to have other conversations. Our live viewers, we also want to thank you. So please have a safe journey back home. Thank you.
Where's your other half?
Hello, nice to meet you.
And Faris, thank you for bringing Randall to the event. I appreciate it.
Nicole, you want to